In adoption circles, I think I'm known as a birth father. That is, the natural father of a child who was adopted very soon after his birth. That one event certainly confused my identity. Was I a father or wasn't I a father? Had I got children or hadn't I? I can remember one time in my 20s at a party meeting a woman, and she said, "Have you got any children?" And I hesitated to answer. In fact, I hesitated that long that eventually she said, I thought I was asking the easy questions first. So often I would just say no, but in my 30s and my 40s, I was sort of, sometimes if I met a stranger and we were chatting, I would actually tell the story when she asked that question. And what happened then was very often I got an adoption story back from the person I was talking to, often quite about sensitive and intimate material. And I learned a couple of things from that. First of all, I learned that adoption was full of coincidences and synchronicities. And secondly, what I learned, probably following from the first one, was that adoption was really quite pervasive in our society, particularly resulting from those adoptions of the 1960s and late 1960s and early 1970s, when a set of circumstances in society led to peak numbers of adoptions. I think it affected my attitudes, whether it was attitudes to authority, whether it was attitudes to Christmas, whether it was attitudes to birthdays and anniversaries of the event. Also, it affected my career choices quite a lot. The classic example of that was when my birth son was, say, 17 to 22. I found myself working in a university careers service as a careers counsellor. Probably at that point in his life, and at that point in my life, I sort of realised just how unconscious or subconscious the searching process was. I was sort of looking for this person almost everywhere, in every stage of my life and in every type of activity, really, whether it was walking past someone in the street of that age or in other settings, just wondering what the story was. There's also no doubt that the adoption sort of played havoc with the linear nature of the family tree, if you like. My family was quite complex anyway, because my father had been adopted. So this had happened before. It was like, it's like a family tree is just sort of going straight down, and then all of a sudden there's this schism, this fault line that shifts everything over and out of view, really. You don't know what the adopted person's real name is or their new name, and obviously don't have any information to put in terms of what type of person they are and how things have developed and whether they have any family of their own or whatever. I mean, every family has its black sheep, but probably in our family it was quite hard work finding a white one. So it became more complex. The family sort of became much more complex. And I found myself writing quite a lot about my family, particularly my parents, collecting their life stories and putting a couple of those major chunks of those into 2 books. And I became a writer, and I don't think I would have been a writer but for that one incident. In many ways, it was a paradoxical choice for me. By that, I mean that it wasn't the natural route that was suited to my skills. I started off as a mathematician, statistician, and worked in those areas in my 20s. So to become a writer wasn't something you would have naturally picked, that I was heading that way. But along the way to being a writer, I suppose I picked up certain skills, partly from the therapeutic nature of writing about this incident, writing about relationships, writing about other parts of my life, just for my own benefit, really. When I came to write The Birth Father's Tale, it was actually a bit easier than I might have imagined, partly because I had all these notes in notebooks about the event, written at different stages in my life. There's no doubt in my mind that that one event complicated my life in all sorts of ways. What might have been a relatively straightforward life was probably made full of more incident. I was perhaps more heavily sensitized to certain things. I probably travelled more, I had more complicated relationships, and on the other hand, in a very positive way, it probably led to wonderful friendships and a lot more happening to me than might have happened otherwise. And it probably allowed me to go deeper. But always in the background, I think, there was this sort of unanswered wound about that loss. And the loss of a child to adoption, it happens without any ceremony, without any funeral often, or it did happen in the 1960s and 70s in that way. So you were expected to just forget all about it. But of course you can't do that. You can't forget about something that was so, I suppose, precious, really. Sometimes I wonder whether being a writer is part of the self-punishment and guilt and a little bit of shame that goes with the birth father territory, really. It's probably been a way that I've pursued, even though I knew right from the outset that it was going to be hard work, and it was certainly going to be hard work making money out of it. I mean, writers have a lot of jokes they tell about that, about how writing is a hard way not to make a living, or writing would be a great job if it weren't for the paperwork, or when you're a writer, you're only one letter away from becoming a waiter. But I persevered with the writing career, and eventually I think it led to The Birth Father's Tale as a natural thing that I was probably working towards all the way along. Writing about birth children, writing about adoption I always think of it like a creative writing exercise, really, where the teacher comes in and gives the class a prompt. Let's imagine the situation where two people come together, they have a child, the child is adopted, and then 30 or 40 years later, they meet up through some situation that may or may not be contrived. Write a short story about that. I don't think I could have attempted The Birth Father's Tale as a book, as a memoir, unless without the pioneering work of people like Gary Clapton, Celia Whitney, Gary Coles, and various others who'd done a little bit of research on birth fathers. When I say a little bit, Gary Clapton had gone to a lot of trouble to interview many for his PhD thesis. What I learnt from that was that some of the things that I thought were unusual about me actually were played out by many others as well. Some of the popular opinion of birth fathers of the 60s and 70s might be that they are feckless, fly-by-night, casual people who didn't really accept their responsibilities and wandered off into the night, never to be seen again. But the research suggests that that isn't true. They were often in stable relationships. It was just that the age of adulthood was 21 in those days. Often they didn't have much part in the decision. They were shocked. They went into a difficult grieving process, and they have never forgotten the incident. And I can certainly identify with all of those things. So I think, but knowing that research enabled me to carry on and tell a more personal story, I think, about first of all about the search, and then alternating with the impact that it had on my life.